Hi everybody, thanks for calling in. I'm glad you could make it. So today I'm going to be going over Homekeeper 101. And to do this, I'm actually going to just hop right into my test drive account. And we're going to dive right in. And so while I'm doing that, if folks could type into the chat box, if you just can type in, what is your experience, how confident do you feel with reports? If you could have it in the chat box, do you feel like a total beginner? Do you feel like an expert or somewhere in between? So that's question number one. The second question for you is if there's a report that you guys are trying to work on that you haven't been able to. So we'll keep that in the front of our mind as we go through reporting. If you have a report that you just can't figure out, put that in the chat box too, and we will walk through that by the end of this call. And thanks for typing in, Diana. So Diana said that she feels like a beginner, and I can see that you're typing too, Anastasia. And so while Anastasia is typing, I am going to hop over, or I'm going to start navigating in my training account. And so the first thing that we wanted to make sure all users know about, number one, you don't have to even be a beginner to start using reports and dashboards in Homekeeper. So Homekeeper comes with both reports and dashboards out of the box. We know that our users need to do reports and need to do dashboards. So you can just click on the Reports tab. We'll start with the less exciting one. You can just click on the Reports tab and you will see folders on this left side. And these folders include reports out of the box that you can start using. And so a clue for you is if the folder has dashboard in it, it means that the reports that are inside that folder are the basis of a dashboard. We'll get to dashboards in a second. So the ones that just say dashboard in them, these might not be that useful to use. They might not be that useful for you to use when you're trying to make other reports, so you might want to take a look at things that just say plain reports in the title, like monitoring or homeownership reports is a good place to start. And yours is going to look a little different than mine does because I have some stuff I worked on, and since this is my training account, I don't think you have a report called Owners with Children. But you do have a report called Current Homeowners. So if you click on that, you'll see this report is pretty basic, but we think that pretty much anybody managing a homeownership program in Salesforce would need this at some point. So it's filtered. It's filtering my service files and showing me all of the service files that say current owner. I've got my applicant, my co-applicant, the property status, and the date that they purchased. Cool. So Anastasia, we actually, I don't know if we have that report out of the box, but we can definitely get that report with a few clicks in Salesforce. So this is an example of a report that comes out of the box. And just to dial back again, how did I find it? I went over here and looked for a report folder that looked promising, homeownership reports, and I clicked on current owners. Another thing that can be helpful when navigating in this reports pane, you can pin report folders to the top. So if you're always needing this, if you always need to talk about your monitoring, or if you have a folder for things like report out to city or report out to board, you could pin that to the top, and then you don't have to look for it anymore. It's just right here. And so that's one tip. So we kind of talked about what reports come with Homekeeper, and then if you hop over to dashboards, you'll see Homekeeper comes with about, I think, like 8 dashboards. And so if you click this drop down, this is going to show you all of the dashboards that you have access to. I probably have a few more because this is, again, my training account. But you definitely have dashboards about homebuyer demographics, homeowner AMI, homeowner service file dashboard, minor events, housing opportunities. These are all right there for you to start using. And one thing that you should know about dashboards that's a little different than reports is that dashboards only refresh when you tell them to, unless you can schedule them to refresh every night. That's a little more complicated. But so if you open this dashboard and you didn't see anything, that might be because you haven't refreshed. It only goes and looks at your data when you tell it to refresh. So the last time I refreshed this dashboard was in March. So if I hit refresh now, it's going to, I don't know if my data has changed significantly, that we'll see any changes. But if you do this for the first time, it can be really exciting to see suddenly all these pie charts light up with colors. And so, yeah, there you go. So it looks pretty much the same, but yours might look different. And so just to kind of illustrate the point I was talking about before, so each of these dashboard components is actually based off of a report. So to build this one dashboard, we had to build 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-ish reports. Sometimes you can leverage reports in different ways to create different charts. But basically, if you click on any one element in a dashboard, it's going to bring you back to the report behind it. And so what we saw on the dashboard was a pie chart related to status. This is a report grouped by status. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. One of our tips for reporting is if you're ever trying to make a report, a lot of the times you have to create a grouping and or summarize a number of fields. Usually one of those two things makes it possible to show something in the dashboard. But let's back up one step. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat box. So okay, I just showed you how you could maybe like fumble around in the dark to get to those reports. Something else you should know about the reports and dashboards that come with HomeKeeper is that we have a whole list. We call it a catalog of reports and dashboards, and you can go check those out before you even go, exploring in HomeKeeper. So we have a whole section called About Reporting in the support forum. So it's kind of long, so you might want to just search. And okay, so the section is called Reporting with HomeKeeper, and it's actually at the very bottom if you scroll. But I will paste this link into the chat box so you guys you could just bookmark this. And so the Reporting with HomeKeeper section of the support forum contains two pieces. One is example reports and dashboards. Most of what this example reports and dashboards section shows is if somebody calls me up or submits a ticket and says, I really need help with a report or dashboard, and it's slightly more complicated than I can verbally tell them, I'll write up how to create those reports. So you can see there's like 22 articles. Some of the articles have more than one report in them, and those have examples. But the first thing you should know, we also have a list of all the dashboards that come with HomeKeeper and all the reports that come with HomeKeeper. So if we click on this, you can see that this is telling you which folder is which and what reports you'll find inside of them. And so you can see it lists all those dashboard report folders we saw earlier. So you can also look and see, okay, I want to know about monitoring events. It looks like there's a report about which ones are active, which service files are distressed, who has a late payment. And so this can give you an idea of what you might go find over in Salesforce. So this is sort of our index or table of contents for what HomeKeeper comes with. So there's one for reports, and there's also one for dashboards. So I'll put the reports one in the chat box, and I will put the dashboard one in the chat box. And so those are just kind of a go-to list. You can see what does HomeKeeper come with. But a lot of the time, our users need different stuff. Your funders and your local governments care about different things than we put in our reports out of the box. So the second thing that I'll talk about is how to take a report that looks really close to what you want and to modify that to be closer to something that you want to see. So if we we go to the Reports tab and let's look at the report to homeowners. Let's say we go to this current homeowners report and we say, this is pretty great, but I need to know how many bedrooms each house is and how many baths is. Someone asked you about that. And this is just for current owners. You could hit, because you find a report that's kind of like what you want, you can hit customize, or you can just hit save as and then customize. Also save as. And so I'm going to call this current homeowners with number of bedrooms. And to avoid confusing people, I'm going to put this in, I'm going to put it in unfiled public reports. So something here you guys might want to know. When you are creating reports, you can create new folders to hold reports. So like if you are doing a whole bunch of reports for a particular project, you could create a report folder to hold them. And if you have questions about that, I can show you exactly how to do that in a couple minutes. But out of the box, there's two places you'll always have access to save reports: my personal custom reports and unfiled public reports. The difference is my personal custom reports, nobody else can see. Unfiled public reports, everybody can see, and it can get really messy. But it can be a good place to save something if you don't have a report folder yet. So I'll save this one here. So it's a long way to talk about saving as. Basically, I hit save as, gave it a different name, and now I can hit customize. So customize equals edit. And now I can start mucking around with this report. And so there's a couple sections you should just be familiar with as you're starting to use reports. So let me pause and I can draw on it to get a little clearer. So this section right here is the section where you can find all the fields that are accessible in this report. And to make things go more quickly, you can type a field name right in there, and it'll make the list go a lot smaller. But that's the fields pane of this reporting window. And so, and then up here is the filter pane. And so the filter pane is where you are going to change which rows down here show up. And so you can see right now, this report has a filter. It's looking at all the service files with status as current owner. And so we could change that to make fewer or more rows show up. And then the other thing you should know about the filters pane is that it always has this crazy ownership thing, show all or my services, and then there's usually a date name. And so I'm trying to figure out this drawing thing, and it's not, and then, okay, so if I'm talking about the panes, I'll talk about filters in just a sec, but the other pane is the preview pane. The preview pane gives you a quick glance at what the report's going to look like based on what filters you've applied and what groupings or other attributes you've added to the report. So it's going to show you kind of what your report will look like, but don't trust it as being completely accurate. If something's missing in the preview pane, it might just not be showing in preview. And when you hit run report, which is up here, that's when you're actually running the report. And when you should expect to see everything you're expecting to see is when you hit run report. And one last, or a couple other things I'll talk about. So every report has a report type. So right now we're talking about customizing a report, which is why if you find a report that looks a lot like what you want, it does the work of figuring out what report type you're using for you. Report types control which rows show up. And so this report type, services with property, it means show me all the service files that have a property. And it lets you see the fields from both. So we've got service file fields here, and property fields here. So it's going to show me every single service file that has a property associated, and I can drop in fields from the service file and drop in fields from the property. And if you're totally overwhelmed by that, don't worry about it. We'll talk more about that later, but just wanted to point that out. And then there's one more place I just want to, there's all kinds of great things in the reports. But one other thing to pay attention to is the Format tab. You can see every report you start with is going to be in this thing called tabular format. It's kind of like tabs, like how Microsoft Excel CSV files, or it looks like an Excel file. And I'm going to resume sharing so we can look at how this looks live. But there are some other formats you can use to create reports. So just so you know, summary and matrix. Summary and matrix let you group things across rows. So just to give you an idea for this, now I have this beautiful blue window and I can group by property status. And I can drag this back out and not group by it. But basically, it'll pull the different rows into sections when you group. And summary is one grouping, matrix is two. Summary is just one across the top, and then matrix lets you do it on like the left side too. And so what did I say I wanted to do? We said we wanted to modify this, right? So, okay, cool. We can see I'm starting to type bed because I want to see bedroom, and that's shortening this list I have to look at. So if I grab property, drop it in, if I grab bathroom, drop this in, I can get these into the report without needing to scroll up and down. And so let's maybe look at so something else you can do by leveraging this fields pane, you can also pick these up, you can drop them in the report. You can also pick them up and drop them into the filters pane. And so the filters, have all these sort of logical things that can let you determine what shows up. So let's say I want to look at all my current homeowners who own a property with more than one bedroom. And when I run a report, I'll see a fuller list of this crew of people, and I can save. So that's how you would modify an existing report. And so that's one of the more easy things that you can do is just go find a report that looks kind of like what you want to see and then modify it. You can hit Save As, and then you hit Customize, and you start playing around. And so now let's jump over to, and we can talk about, okay, that's great, Liz. I can't find a report that looks like the one I want to see. That's when you start figuring out how to build your own reports from scratch. And so before we dive into that, we have a lot of resources that can help you get up to speed on creating your own reports from scratch. So as I mentioned, we've got this reporting with Homekeeper thing in the support forum. We've got a list of example reports and dashboards, so go check out in there, and that'll give you some clues. We've also got this section called Reporting How-Tos. So that's got tips and tricks and all kinds of how-tos there. And then there's one other resource that you might want to know about if you're the type of person who wants to read stuff before you dive in. We have this thing called Creating a Homekeeper Dashboard Workbook, and it'll walk you through creating your own dashboard from scratch. And so those are some great places to start. But when we talk about building a report from scratch, you have to start thinking about this thing called a report type. And we have an article here that will help you kind of walk through that thinking process to get to the report you want, which is my long way of getting to Anastasia's suggested report. Okay. So we've got a lot of, yeah. So this is a good article. It's kind of long, but it's good for if you're totally stuck to check this out. So like if you're trying to get information out of Homekeeper, what do you need to think about? And so the first thing is, where are all the places the information I'm trying to get stored? Because that's going to help you choose a report type. And so you can see here, Laura, who's one of our old developers, went really intense. She had this really intense report she had to build. But she had a spreadsheet and then went and actually mapped, like, where in Homekeeper and Salesforce would I find the information I'm looking for? And which object, like what screen do I need to get to find the information I'm looking for? And that's going to guide what report you use. So I think in our last call I had some questions about like loans and stuff like that. And so that's a really great one. Like if you're doing a report and you need the interest rate, you're probably going to need to go get information from funding sources. But just to make efficient use of our time, I'm going to scroll back up and look at the report Anastasia wanted to get. Okay. So Anastasia had asked, I'd like a report that collects owner emails, service file information, name, and addresses. And so Anastasia, just refresh my memory, are you looking for the property address, like what's the address of the house they own, or are you looking for their mailing address, which might be a P.O. box or might be the house that they own? Property address. Okay, cool. So it's your lucky day. So to get to where Anastasia wants to go, so she wants to see a report that shows owner email, information from the service file, and address, so property address. And so we're going to need to create a custom report. We don't have a report that shows that right out of the box in Homekeeper. So the way that you create a report, if it totally doesn't exist so far, you click on the Reports tab, you click on the New button, or New Report button, and then you have to choose a report type. So this is sort of what I was referring to before. And luckily, I know this off the top of my head because I'm in this a lot, but we actually have a report type that will give us the information that we're looking for. And the report type is called Services with Property, Applicant, and Co-Applicant. And what this means is it's going to show me all my service files with an associated property. And it's also going to let me see the contact information for the applicant and the co-applicant. And if you're like, hey, I never would have figured that out on my own, yeah, you know, that's why I encourage people who are stuck on reports, submit a request in the support forums. You'll have a green button right next to your name in the support forums. If you're stuck on reports, let us know. We're always happy to point you in the right direction because we do know this report stuff is hard. One other tip is if you go to our website and go to news, this is our blog. And one of the things we've been doing, because we know reports are so hard, is we have been blogging about reports. And so you can see there are a few resources in here called like Make Faster, Better Reports and Make Homekeeper Reporting a Breeze with these 5 Homekeeper report types. So I'm going to paste this into the chat box. But you can always look at these blogs for more inspiration, and they're written a little bit more in a narrative format than the health articles. But this report type that I just chose is listed in there. So services with property, applicant, and co-applicant is what you're going to want to use in Anastasia. And then, so we've got this report type. Oh no, it's not showing anything. So the first thing we want to do, always, always, always change show to all. We want to make sure we're seeing service files you created, service files somebody from 5 years ago created, everybody. And then you also want to make sure that unless you're using a date filter, that the date filter is to all time. And if you decide you want it, you can switch this all around. You can also add another date filter down in the filter scheme. And now let's start adding some fields. So I think Anastasia, you're going to want applicant full name, co-applicant full name, and let's add service file name for good measure. So to slow down, what I'm doing, I'm typing in the fields that I want, making sure I'm pulling them from the right folder. Then I'm double clicking and it just adds them to the next row. I could also like drag them if I decided service file name should be first. And then property, I'm pulling the property address. And let's look at email. So you can see, I wonder if I can go. Yeah. So you'll see that in reports, the object that information comes from generally is going to be grouped into a folder. So you can see that it's the applicant folder that's holding fields that come from the applicant contact record. Co-applicant folder holds fields that come from the co-applicant contact record. And so I don't have a lot of emails in my test data, but you can see email are pulled right next to applicant, co-applicant emails next to co-applicant. And let's see. Anastasia, do you have some other fields that you wanted to see? I know you had other things from the service file, but you didn't say specifically what those might be. And I'll add in them like town, city, and zip codes and stuff right now. So this is a good example. So I typed in CIT, and so it's pulling up a lot of city fields. But like, if I want to know what city the property's in, got to make sure I'm pulling from the property folder. I'll pull that in. Pull in states. Pull in zip code. And I will add whatever other fields you suggest, Anastasia. Okay. Cool. Well, just to like give people some just a little more context for sort of what information is possible with this, I'm going to add in close date. So we can pull the close date that comes from the service file. And let's see, what else do we want to know? Were they overcrowded when they apply? I want to know that too for some reason. And so, very cool. We've got a lot of fields on this preview pane. I can't even look at all of them. And then I could save this right now, or I can run it, and you can still save it after you run it. So let's just run it, see if this looks kind of like what we want. And there we go. We've got fields from the applicant contact, fields from the co-applicant contact, fields from the service file, and fields from the property, all in one report. And so I'm going to save this, and so I'll say owner, email, and property info, and I will put this in my example reports from Lexington folder. Actually, I'll put it in unfiled and show you guys how you might start sorting them. So let's say, I know that I'm going to make a bunch of reports related to contacting my homeowner, but I don't have a folder for them yet, but I know I want to save it. I'll just save it in unfiled. And then when I go back to the reports tab is going to show me what was I in most recently, and I can create a new report folder. And I'll actually call this office hours example. And you can control whether like everybody else in the organization can only read your reports or whether they can read and write your reports. Read if you don't want them messing with them. Read, write if you want someone to be able to edit them. And then you can go find, it looks like I have a lot of example reports. And like looking for all of these. I can't remember what I named it, but basically this is, you can move them all over into a folder once you save that report, and then they'll be organized. And then I will have a little folder down here that says office hours example reports, and I've got all of those in there, and I can pin it to the top. So yeah, so that is how that's how I can create a report to what Anastasia asked. And so that one's pretty simple. And so I guess the main takeaway from that is if you're stuck and you can't get all the information you want to see into one report, send in a ticket and we'll try and point you in the right direction. A lot of the time it's possible. Sometimes if you're pulling information from too far away of places, it might not be possible. But usually we can point you in the right direction. And Diana, I know you were also on the call, but or Sherry, thanks for calling in. If you guys have any questions about reports that you are trying to create, feel free to type those into the chat box, and we can go over those. Or if folks don't have examples, I'm just going to start building some example reports just to get you guys an idea of what's possible. There's all kinds of really cool features. So one thing that people want to report on a lot is funding sources. So I'm going to create a new report related to funding sources. And so Sherry, since I work mainly on Homekeeper, I don't really know the object structure of like donations and stuff. That's a great thing to ask in like the Power of Us Hub or like the Salesforce nonprofit community. But like mainly the stuff I can really coach on is like properties, services, application household numbers, like all the stuff you find on the Homekeeper object. So I'll definitely highlight features that you can use with reports, but I don't do report opportunity examples just because that's somebody else's product is like opportunities in the donation sense. But let me do funding sources because it might give you some insights and like stuff you can use if you are working with donations. So I'm going to create a report. So let's say one of my board members works at a bank and they want to know who are your homeowners getting loans from and what's the average amount. So if you're thinking about that question, so if they say who's the lender, what's the average amount, we know that those fields come from the funding source object. And so like if you want to know the loan principal, you'd have to go to a service file. And then you'd have to go look at their funding sources. And see, what is it? This is my first one. And so, okay, I want to see amount, I want to see interest rate, and I want to see lender. Okay, what does that tell me? That tells me that I need to have a report type with funding source in it. So I type fund. You'll see there's a whole bunch with funding sources and contact. I'm going to choose services with funding sources. What you should know about the longer named ones like services with funding sources and contact and lender and loan officer. What the stuff after the and means, it just means like you'd be able to get the fields that are on loan officer or lender. So like if I chose services with funding sources and loan officer, it means I can see like amount, interest rate, lender, but if there's a loan officer connected, I can also see the loan officer's phone number, first name, fax, and all of that. So actually, I'll choose that just so you can kind of see what that looks like. And so again, I'm going to switch this to all. I'm going to switch the date field to all. And you know what? So another thing you should know about this report, this is showing me only the service files with a funding source that have a loan officer. So that's why this report is so short, because it's limited. It's only showing me the funding sources that have a loan officer. So just something you should know that you might run into. Depending on the report type you pick, it might not be what you want. You might need to go back. So like I'm going to go back now because I didn't mean to only see the ones with a loan officer. Scary error. hit back again, I'll be able to choose that other report type. All right, so this should show me a lot more funding sources. So again, switching all. But thinking back, what did I say? Okay, I only want to see loans. So funding sources store a whole bunch of different types of funding sources. We've got buyer's cash, we've got grants, but I just want to look at loans. So it's always a good idea to be like, okay, I only want to look at, what do I want to look at? Do I want to look at all these funding sources, buyer's cash, grant, down payment? How can I filter out these buyer's cash and stuff like that? So a great way to do that is to find a field that'll distinguish. So it's a good thing to think about for like service files. If you have more than one type of service file, or if you want to like filter out your applicants, you might just want to at the start make sure like you're not seeing applicants when you're trying to look at homeowners. And like here, I want to make sure I'm only seeing loans and I'm not seeing buyer's cash. So to sort that funding source issue out, I'm going to pull in funding source type equal. And so I just click on that little magnifying glass, and I'll say, okay, I want to look at loans, purchase loans. And that is going to sort it. So I'm looking all at purchase loans. And okay, not quite what I want to see. I'm seeing a bunch of second loans too. So where was that stored? That's stored in lien position. So I'll pick up lien position, drop it here, and I only want to look at first. And so I'll hit OK. Just so you know, you can do like other stuff like not equal to, the greater, less than. Those are only going to work with numbers, so they wouldn't work with first. But cool, okay, that's a lot more manageable. And so now I can pull in who is the lender. So if you're using the lender field, this will be filled in. To fill in amount. Okay, and that's a great place to start. So we can run the report and kind of see what that looks like. When you do this, you might spot that there's some blanks that you want to fix. So it looks like there's some funding sources that don't have the lender field filled in. I'm not going to fix that right now, but just stuff that you might encounter, like you might see data holes as you're building reports. But now I'm going to talk about some cool features that you can start using. So, you know, if this report is mostly related to like the amount of the loan, you can, so if it's a currency or a number field, when you click this little drop-down arrow, and so first of all, you can sort ascending, descending. You can also do that by clicking. But I can summarize this field. And when you hit summarize, it's going to say, what do you want to do? And so we could say average, or we could say sum. It looks a little weird when you do two. I think it's a little hard to read, but so down here it says that the total of $1 million and an average of 119 is the amount of these first mortgages. So that's pretty cool, but that's over the total. What if you want to see it per lender? So something else you can do in reports is do grouping. And groupings will actually inherit these like average and sum, and you'll see them in each grouping. So there's a couple ways to get to a grouped report. If you switch from tabular to summary, it'll sort of like coach you to what's possible. Now you'll see this drop a field here. I could pick up lender, drop it there, and it's going to group. Or I could have just stayed where I was, clicked this little drop down, said group by, and there we go. I've got it grouped by the lenders who are lending to my program. And just to make it a little easier to read, you can see I've got the total and the average for, well, I should have fixed this, but for Bank of America, total of 378, average of 126. And that is a pretty cool report to like talk to different folks about what's going on in your program and what types of financing that your buyers are accessing. And so that is good for all kinds of numerical fields. So that could be good for monthly housing costs. You could talk about the average housing cost burden at the time someone buys. All kinds of things you can do with these summary number fields. And so I'm going to take a couple steps back just so I can show you guys some other features that I like. So I'm going to unsummarize this. And I am going to ungroup. So just, drag and drop kind of. And I will add a bucket field. So what if I want to know how many first loans were between 50 and 100,000 and 100 and 150 and 100 and 150 and 200. You can add a bucket field. So bucket fields so both these two things you see here, formulas and bucket fields, they're ways to deal with information solely in reports. So like, rather than organizing and labeling each funding source as like, is it between 100 and 200 or 200 and 300? Bucket fields let you just do that right here in the report. So source column is amount. So amount bucket, it's called amount bucket. And so so say less than 100K. And I'll add one more. 50. And so you probably have more meaningful brackets that you could use, but you can create brackets, and those will let you run reports on them. And so now that I've got that bucket field, well, cool, I can group by it too. And so that lets you sort of slice and dice your data in a little more of an intuitive way. And once you have a grouping, then you can add a chart. So I didn't talk about this before, but like this is a great way to talk about information in a way that's easy to chart. So like you don't want to create a bar chart of like the difference between 92 and 89. Maybe you just want to talk about like what are the average amounts for a mortgage. This is a little bit easier to look at graphically. So you can practice so you're able to add charts to dashboards, but you can practice in reports. And I definitely encourage you to practice in reports. And so this is a little nicer than just like graphing, the amount, 89, 89, 100, 100. This lets you sort of talk about what's our average principal amount for first loan in our program. And so that is using this thing called a bucket field. And so that is a bucket field. And so for folks on the call, do you have any other example reports? I'm going to try and hit some other like tips and tricks as we go along, but if you have ideas, it's probably better than me just making stuff up off the top of my head. So I'll try and weave in examples to like real world reports you're trying to build, if you do have any ideas. Okay. Well, okay. Not seeing any ideas in the chat box. I'm just gonna go for it. And sales per year. Very cool. I like it. So Anastasia, you can basically use any report with services in the name to get there. And so let's type in services and see what comes up. So again, plain services, that's just going to be service files. Services with AMI is going to be all the service files that have AMI built in, and you'll be able to put in the AMI field. But let's go back and use this one, because this has more information. Maybe we'll want to use other stuff later. And so this is going to be a report on all of my service files that are connected to a property, I believe. Let me just double check that. Okay. Yeah. Actually, and so this is actually every service file, whether or not they have a property associated. And so let's put in service file name, just so it's easier to read. And cool. So to get where Anastasia wants to go, which is sales per year, is we've got to filter this out. So it looks like I've got some inquiries in here. And so there are a couple different ways you can filter for like owners. You can usually use status. Let me just draw on here. So see, so when, of course, use white, when filtering for owners, you could use static, you could use property, you could use close date, and I think those are the big ones, but those are like 3 different options that all should work for adding filters right here. I like to use close date and property if you're using status for like up for resale and stuff, then you have to think a little harder. If you just do property is not blank and close date is not blank, that'll like catch everybody who's ever owned. So just wanted to make a note of that. So my favorite is to use close date. So I'm going to say, show me everybody who's closed. So where close date is not equal to blank, don't enter anything, hit OK. Great, and so I pulled that in here. Now let me pull it down here. And so one thing, actually, yeah, so like a couple of things I want to talk about that are super cool with dates in Salesforce. If you pull in a date field in here, Salesforce uses, I think they call it relative date filters, but basically you can do stuff like this year or this month. I think you can even do like last 3 months, or let's do last 10 years. I don't know if that's going to work if it's like that. Or it does. So just so you know, last, next, and this are all possibilities with relative date filter. So typing those in right here, and I'm pretty sure we have it in the HomeKeeper how-to. So we have a write-up of the different language you can use there. And then when you have a date field here, okay, let's group by it. Not super helpful. But if I click on this again, it's going to let me expand it from just like not April 5th, but like to April 2008 or quarter 2, 2008, or to the calendar year. And so you can see now it is grouped 2008, 2009, 2010, and let's add a chart just to like feel great about ourselves. We'll add a chart, and now we can see what was our average sales volume per year. And that's filtered for like the last 10 years. So we run that report, we can check out what that kind of looks like, and that's pretty cool. And so this is another thing where like we can add those averages here. So like we could say I'm not sure if everybody's using like days on wait list, but like you could, maybe you want to know about how long it took people to buy their house. Like that data is not very good to play with, but or what's the average purchase price per year? Again, my data is not super clean, but we could do the average purchase price and edit the chart. And so another cool thing with charts, you can plot additional values and think, yeah. So now I've got, well, my data isn't very clean, but like if it was better, you would see, you know, the average purchase price per year on top of this volume chart. So I'm just trying to hit as many examples as possible. I'm not sure if you like actually would want that, but so like, you know, I've got a grouping and then I've got an average related to that grouping, and then you can squash those on top of each other and get those in one report. And let me just hit a couple, I have like 5 more minutes, so I'm just going to hit a couple more examples. So that's a summary report, but if you want to do a matrix report, it lets you group in 2 ways. So let's say, I spelled this wrong. So let's say I want to know what year did everybody close, but what year did they finish their application, or like what month did they finish their application? I can group both on like in a horizontal way and a vertical way. So let's do quarter because that'll be a little more easier to look at. And let's say I don't want to see a summary, I just want to see a count. So now, and so a matrix report lets you like group, I can see all the people who bought in calendar year 2008 and what quarter they applied. And it's kind of hard to read, so you can hit hide detail, and that makes it a little easier to read. But, you know, for different scenarios, you might want to see, and it doesn't always have to be numbers. Like you could do, like what was, for which language spoken, like what was the primary means with which they came in your program. Like this could say primary language spoken, and this could say like, how did you hear about our program? And you could kind of like look at that. So that's another example of like how a matrix report might be helpful. And yeah, so just with 5 minutes left, I just want to highlight that if you go to the support forums, there is so much to do with reports, but the materials related to what I've talked about today are going to be in this forum, which will say May 2017 when I fix that. But a lot of the tips and tricks I discussed today are listed here. So like reporting 101, how to create your own report. Those blogs I mentioned, and then we have example reports and the dashboard reporting workbook. Everything that I've talked about is in this training article, so go ahead and check that out. And I encourage you to look at those. And then I also encourage folks to ask questions about reports if you're stuck, or if you have an idea and you're like, I don't know if this is possible, let us know. We love helping you dig into your data. So if you are in the support forums, you'll see submit a request right here to send it in, and then you'll end up in our example dashboards and report section, and it'll be great. You'll have the report you need, and other people can see what you asked in the past. So with that said, we're almost at time, so I don't want to take up folks' time, but I'll hang out. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll hang out, and if folks have questions, you can go ahead and type those into the chat box, but we'll also post this recording in the article that I just referenced. So I'm just going to stop the